You know, it's a funny thing. The people who are best at explaining science to the public are often not the same people who are out there, well, actually revolutionizing it. There's this fundamental tension between the person who polishes the ideas and the person who disrupts them. And that tension, it creates a very, very thin line between what we end up calling genius and what we first dismiss as just being a quack.
So let's just dive right into the statement that sparked this whole thing. The argument goes that many of history's greatest scientific minds were, and I'm quoting here, borderline quacks. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty shocking thing to say, right? It almost sounds like an insult.
But what if it's not just a cheap shot? What if it's actually pointing to some kind of fundamental, maybe even necessary friction at the heart of how science actually moves forward? Is there a deeper truth here? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look back. Because this pattern of genius being mistaken for madness, it isn't new at all. In fact, it's pretty much written all over the history of science.
I mean, just look at this lineup. You've got Galileo, branded a heretic because he dared to say the Earth orbits the sun. You've got Ignaz Semmelweis, who was literally driven into an asylum for the crazy idea that doctors should wash their hands. Ludwig Boltzmann was professionally mocked for believing in atoms, and Barbara McClintock, she was ignored for decades after discovering that genes could actually jump around. Every single one of them was dismissed.
So a pretty clear pattern starts to emerge, doesn't it? These weren't just isolated incidents. It's almost like a formula. The more an idea threatened to completely upend the way we thought about things, the more its creator got labeled an outsider, a crank, a quack. They weren't wrong. They were just too early.
So, the big question is, why? Why does this keep happening over and over again? What is it about true game-changing innovation that makes the people behind it seem so, well, crazy to everybody else at the time?
Well, it seems to boil down to three big reasons. First, innovators violate consensus. Science, for the most part, is built on agreement. Innovators, by their very nature, have to disagree. Second, they ignore the whole incentive system. I mean, institutions are set up to reward safe, small, incremental steps, not giant, risky leaps into the unknown. And finally, and this is a big one, they often speak a totally new language. Their ideas can literally sound like nonsense because the framework we need to even understand them just hasn't been invented yet. And get this, not even Albert Einstein was immune to this. Some of his own peers dismissed his early, groundbreaking papers on relativity as, and I quote, the work of a crank. Just let that sink in for a second. What was once considered crackpottery is now literally the foundation of modern physics.
And this all brings us to a really crucial tension at the heart of this entire debate. This built-in conflict between the need for clarity and the drive for discovery. So on this slide, we've laid out two very different but totally essential roles in the scientific world. On one side, you have the representative. Their main goal is clarity. They build trust with the public by explaining what the current consensus is. But on the other side, you have the innovator. Their goal is pure discovery, which means they have to challenge that very same consensus. See the problem? One is an interpreter of the map, the other is off exploring completely uncharted territory.
And let's be absolutely crystal clear here. We need both. Science desperately needs great communicators to build public trust and understanding. But it also needs those stubborn, visionary innovators pushing the boundaries out on the fringe. The key thing to remember, though, is that these roles are not the same. They are not interchangeable. In fact, the skills that make you great at one are often the exact opposite of the skills you need for the other. Okay, so how does this tension actually play out today, in the real world? Well, our modern scientific institutions, with all their rules and structures, have accidentally created a very specific, and you could argue a very dangerous blind spot.
Just think for a minute about all the pressures on a scientist today. You've got grant cycles that almost always favor the safest bets. You've got a peer review process that tends to reinforce the existing consensus. There are publication incentives that often value quantity over quality, not to mention rigid career ladders and PR concerns. All of these systems, they're designed for stability, but they have the unintended consequence of filtering out the truly radical disruptive ideas.
And what all this creates is a really powerful conformity bias. See, the danger isn't that we have great science communicators. The real danger is when the entire system starts to select for safety and polish and against raw, messy originality. Because that messy, uncomfortable originality, that's where the real breakthroughs come from.
Which brings us right back to where we started, but now, hopefully, with a whole new perspective. That provocative quote, it wasn't really an attack on any single person.
It's really about a structural tension that's baked right into the process of science itself. It's this constant tug of war between advancing knowledge and representing knowledge. And these two jobs, these two forces, almost always operate on opposite sides of what society considers respectable at any given moment.
So here it is. This is the core idea. Innovators don't just happen to look like quacks sometimes. They almost have to. Think about it. To see what everyone else misses, to believe what everyone else rejects, and to keep pushing forward with zero validation, that requires a mindset that is by definition way outside the mainstream. If they didn't risk looking completely foolish, they wouldn't be innovating at all.
So, what does all this mean for the future? If we actually accept this historical pattern, it leads us to a pretty powerful and maybe even a slightly uncomfortable conclusion. It means that the ideas that seem strange, or fringe, or just plain weird today, those are very often the ideas that will become the bedrock of science tomorrow. Today's heretic becomes tomorrow's Nobel laureate. That thin line between genius and quackery isn't just thin. It's constantly being redrawn by history. And that leaves us with one final, crucial question we have to ask ourselves. Given everything we've just talked about, who are the brilliant quacks of our time? Whose seemingly crazy ideas are we all dismissing right now that might just become the foundation of our entire future?